Adam, do you remember video games from the past?
Yes, that's all I talk about.
What if they were to take video games from the past and remaster them?
Oh, gosh.
Again!
Yeah?
And again!
Yeah?
And again!
This is starting to sound like a Twilight Zone episode.
No! It's starting to sound like a hot take! At some point in the future, when some alien society comes down to Earth and carbon dates our time period and sees that we had a video game industry at this point, they're going to be filled with a lot of questions, because EA has decided to actually remaster Command & Conquer and Red Alert. But what makes it even more interesting is the fact that at this current point in time, despite them saying that nobody would really want to buy one of those games again, even though they're remastering these ones, they are still making a mobile version of the game, which is just awful.
That's right, Shane. Command & Conquer Rivals. And I got to play a little bit of it recently, and it's not all that great, but that's not what today's episode is about.
No, because they're not the only company remastering something.
Yes.
We're also getting new remasters of Warcraft 3.
Yes.
And R-Type.
Okay. Let's start with
right.
where you started. Okay, let's talk a little bit
okay.
about Command & Conquer. Huge fans of the series, both of us,
Big.
especially with the initial titles. We had Command & Conquer, which was Tiberian Dawn, I believe, and then there was Red Alert, the first Red Alert game as well.
Command & Conquer was just called Command & Conquer. I don't believe they actually had Tiberian Dawn. Is that what
I
you're calling
wrote
it now?
down Tiberian Dawn.
By God, they've changed the name of Command & Conquer.
No, I think there was always a subtitle. No one used it though.
Okay.
Anyway, we're big fans of the games from back then, so news like this should be enormous to us, and it has piqued my interest.
Oh, sure.
Okay, and there are aspects I think that are things that are cool. Right?
I'm buying it.
Okay. Command & Conquer, this collection, and yes, the two games will come together. This is going to be remade in 4K.
Yes.
Okay, and it's going to have several of the original people that worked on Command & Conquer, one of the lead programmers of the original Command & Conquer games, the composer of the original Command & Conquer games.
Yes. Here, I'll explain this a little bit to you. Once upon a time, there was a wonderful company called Westwood. And Westwood used to make such wonderful games, didn't they, Adam?
I remember Blade Runner, Shane.
Blade Runner. Such good installations of experiences. But at one point, they were purchased by EA. And EA shut their doors.
2003.
And those people left the company to go form a new company.
Aha!
And what was that company called?
Petroglyph Games, and these are the guys.
And now they're working with EA
Yes.
again. Good. Good. No. It's not like EA was the fall of Westwood or anything. They were. It's not like these guys would have any hesitation to work with EA.
Yep.
They should.
Yep.
This is a thing that's going on which I never thought we would ever see. These folks left because they did not like EA.
Right.
So even if they don't say it now, folks, I know they don't.
It truly is bizarre because what EA wound up doing with the Command & Conquer franchise ran that franchise into the ground.
Yes.
With the titles that they had released, and they tried some weird Facebook games and stuff. Now Rivals is a thing, the cell phone game. It seems like Command & Conquer was completely kind of derailed, right?
Yep.
And now they're like, oh, but it's fine. The old games are coming back. So I have a little more to say about that.
Sure.
Okay, there's like two aspects to me when it comes to a remaster game. Okay,
Sure.
There's like the people like us who are like, oh, this is great, and the developers who are like, oh, I used to work on that game. I love that series. You know, I'm gonna treat it right. And then there's the publishers that are like, this is a test. If this game does very well, then we'll do more games. And then, we'll make them in the way we want to make them. And there's probably going to be microtransactions and loot boxes and other things.
But they clearly stated, believe it or not, that there's not going to be microtransactions.
They stated that in like the interview.
They had to.
It's so sad that nowadays, in today's day and age, EA has to say, oh, by the way, there's no microtransactions in the game. You shouldn't have to say that. It's a remaster of a game that never had those in the first place. Why would they be there?
Sorry, they gotta say it.
They do.
You know why?
Because I'm going to assume that.
Because I was thinking, like, oh, good. You know what they're gonna do? They're gonna charge like $1.25 for the red alert little button that you push. They got the little alien ants come out and everything.
Yeah.
Nah, like I am just so it's hilarious. The thing is, though, with this specific game franchise, I like Petroglyph. I like what they're about to do. They have made other games that I have played. Most notably, one of their largest games they've released recently has been Grey Goo, which is a brand new style RTS.
Yep.
I am so curious as to why they need to remaster this, because we actually, believe it or not, have a huge modding community out there that has been modding the original Command & Conquer and Red Alert at a 4K resolution. I want them to have the art style at 4K, not like make the screen really tiny, you know what I mean? And one of the things that's so important to me to get this right is, and I know this is going to sound like heresy, they need to throw in new elements into the game, not change the core. The core stays the same. I'm just saying that you add new modes and stuff like that in order to attract newer consumers, because this would be the best way to get them into that.
I just don't believe that that's what they're going to be doing. I was looking up definitions of remasters and remakes, and those words are used so interchangeably. But this is labeled a remaster, and usually a remaster is something that has a lot of the same elements, and it's just like a slight visual upgrade or better textures.
Sure.
We saw a remaster from Blizzard pretty recently. StarCraft, it just had better visuals, right? So yeah, I think it would lean a little more into the remake territory if they put in some of those things. But I agree with you, man.
Yeah.
If I want to go back to the series, like, I remember I just bought like the Command & Conquer collection not too long ago, and it had like everything in it, and it was on EA's service, right?
Yep, I got it too. Yeah, I mean, I got it back when it came out, and then they released it again. Those weren't really remasters or anything like that. The thing is with Command & Conquer specifically, I feel that that franchise got dealt a bad deck later on in its lifespan.
Yes, it did. EA did that.
Yes, I know, and that's the thing, right? I'm so shocked that this is happening, but I know this is going to sound like heresy. I really do. I want the original game there. I want the original multiplayer. I want all those original aspects still there and still fun to play and all that stuff. But I really believe they should throw in like a MOBA element to it, just extra things that are on top of the initial experience, just so that they can be like, okay, look, if you're into like League of Legends and Dota 2 and stuff like that, here is the same idea with new characters and stuff like that, but also getting that storyline experience. Because what I noticed with Dota 2 and League of Legends is that there's all this narrative and story and world building behind it that they keep adding, but you never have the weight to it. And I feel like with something like this, they could do that, because Command & Conquer has Kayn, it's got some other pretty interesting characters. Red Alert has the exact same thing. Red Alert plays with historical figures, you know what I mean? And I think seeing something like that playing in this world would be really, really cool.
That makes me wonder. It is a remaster, and we had discussed earlier today that some of the video that was in the original Command & Conquer and Red Alert was very low quality.
That's true.
And even if it was, let's say they found a better version of it, it still didn't seem like it was being like film.
Well,
like
it was
put on film.
I believe it was shot on beta.
Yeah.
So like it's an older form of tape technology.
Would they maybe reshoot those cutscenes and stuff? To me, that's heresy.
Yeah,
man.
I don't want to see them do that.
Perfectly cheesy.
Yes.
There's like a layer of cheese in those original Command & Conquer games. It kind of moved forward with many
Command
of the
&
titles
Conquer,
as well.
the original Command & Conquer, they weren't shooting for cheesy yet, and I think they were.
I don't know, man. I remember the start of one mission where one of the Brotherhood of Nod was like, "Okay, man," he was like, he's kind of doing some bad things on the side, and then in the middle of him talking to you, Kayn just shoots him in the head, knocks him over, and says like, "Hey, you're working for me now." Like there was always a bit of cheese there.
I think they were trying to be serious at the time to make good performances, but as it went down the line,
it got
it
got more cheesy.
By the time they get to Red Alert 3, wow, okay, it is like it's purposely made cheesy. But I think the earlier ones, they were trying to do something a little bit different. Red Alert 2 was more cheesy.
Yes.
The later Command & Conquers were.
I'm not going to argue with you.
I just think
more cheesy.
Those earlier ones, I think they're such an interesting point in time, and getting whatever tapes they have or whatever high quality versions of those videos they have and bringing them forward, I think would be a smart move. I don't want to see them reshoot those assets.
Yeah.
I remember those actors really well, and I think that they are definitive of what this game is.
Yeah.
And purposely, I don't think EA wants to pay for a whole new staff of people to make new videos.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not just talking about Command & Conquer today. We wanted to talk about sort of remasters as a whole.
That's right.
Another game that we had heard about today was that R-Type is getting the EX sort of bundle. It's R-Type 1 and R-Type 2.
Yes.
And those games, of course, are from IREM. Where we didn't see anything from the remaster of Command & Conquer, because it's fresh news and there's still a lot of development there.
Sure.
This is coming out this month.
Yes. And I don't think it looks good.
We saw a gameplay trailer.
I like R-Type. I like R-Type plenty. What we saw is, what I can assume is you push a button and you switch between 2D assets and the newer 3D model. However, the 3D models don't look that great. Muddy textures, poor. I saw some aliasing artifacts and stuff like that. I have to imagine that this is just being run off of a Nintendo Switch. It didn't look like it was something. If I was running it on PC, I'd be running it at full resolution. This does not look like it's going to be a system like Demander.
Yeah.
What I did see, though, was very poor assets. And one of the problems I had was even in the trailer, you can see that there's frame drops, right? And in the original R-Types, we got frame drops. What I'm worried about is if you can switch between the old assets and the new assets with a button press, they literally have to match everything one-to-one. So the freedom they would get from actually making a remaster and changing things up is gone. A recreation, rather.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm seeing here is not good.
Yeah. There's something about the fluidity of the game. Like, if they are trying to capture that initial choppiness, I agree with you there. And again, I very much agree with you in that the assets that we did see, it's like, I was just watching the trailer when they're showing the 2.5D mode, and I was like, well, what's the point? The original R-Type, to me, like, the folks that enjoy playing those games, I don't think they're looking for this muddy, textured, almost 2.5D style.
No.
Like, the sprites and everything still look great.
Yeah.
That's the thing about a lot of sprite work that a lot of people say, including myself, is that sprites hold up, especially in spaceship shooters, they hold up. You could probably release this collection with just the 2 games, and it would be fine. Heck, IREM did release a collection with these 2 games onto an SNES cart, and who produced that?
That was Retrobit.
Retrobit, okay.
Yeah.
And that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was.
Right?
I believe the original game looks better than the 3D assets doing here. So I guess you can look at this as like, I'm buying it and I'm getting the 2 games I originally wanted anyway. Yeah. And the 3D there is just for fun.
But they were really showcasing that, man.
Yeah, they were really spending a lot of time on that. But it just, look, folks, the animations in it look not great. Everything seems static. I would have loved to have seen more of a visual upgrade to the 2D assets and see a bonus in that. But because they were creating all this stuff with a 3D engine at the same time, I just don't think it plays. I think what you're seeing there is a promise or an idea that they had at one point, but the execution of it totally doesn't look good. But we could be wrong. Maybe we put it on a PC, load up the graphics, and just put everything up to maximum settings. It's going to look great.
It's coming out on Steam on the 28th as well. Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit more before we had finished about remasters in general. Maybe we touched a little bit of this already. I wrote down some questions about like why a thing should be remastered, right? So they're very simple.
Okay. Yeah. Hit me with the first one.
Okay. So my thought was, so what's the point? What's the point of a remaster? Okay. So my first thing is more pretty.
Really? That's it?
No, that's my first thing.
Okay.
There's like 2 other.
All
okay.
right.
Being able to play it now on now stuff.
That's my biggest thing.
Yeah.
That's literally, when I think of a remaster, I think of the ability to play it on modern hardware, to take the lost assets that were there and bringing them back so that people can more easily have them to be accessible.
Yes, and part of bringing that back as well, we can think about the infrastructure behind the game, online capabilities.
Sure.
You want to play online with Red Alert or Command & Conquer as well. And then I had a third thing. Okay, maybe you'll agree with me. A good first impression for now peoples?
A good first impression for now people.
So, like someone who never played, I write like an infant. So, the people today that didn't experience Command & Conquer back in 1995, I believe it was released, maybe they can pick up a copy of a remaster of that, or hopefully not a remaster of R-Type. I don't know if they'll love that, but maybe they can get Command and Conquer and be like, hey, this looks all right.
Okay.
Maybe the sprite stuff doesn't work so much with some people.
No, I don't think that's going to work. There's a reason. The idea of what the game is, the presentation of the game. Now, there's a difference between a remake and a remaster.
Yeah, right. I already spoken about that. So a remaster is usually it's like most of the assets are there,
And that's what we're looking at with Command & Conquer?
yeah. Usually
Right.
it's a visual improvement, but sometimes there's little tweaks here or there. A remake is many other things, including code, are changed.
If they want modern gamers to like the original Red Alert and Command & Conquer, they're going to have to do something that isn't...
remake.
A remake. Because if they just do the remaster, the problem you're going to get is that there are elements of the game that have aged that I am still okay with. But I feel that those elements may not have been great at the time, and they were just, it was the way you did things. So, great example of this is if they were to ever remaster the original XCOM. I like the original XCOM. I'm going to get so much hate mail from
No,
this.
XCOM's great.
The controls for XCOM are awful.
Okay.
They have
I
always...
see. Okay, this is the hate mail.
The
hate
elements
mail?
of XCOM that were good back then,
Yeah.
it's not even that they aged poorly. They were bad at the time. The future XCOM games improved upon that a lot and made them better. But because at the time it was such a new radical idea of how it would work, things didn't flow. We got lots of games that were like XCOM, like Fallout Tactics and...
You can even look at the strategy RPGs,
yeah.
JRPGs.
Or Jagged Alliance was another one too. It's not the only game like that exists, and even though it was the first of its kind, there was only so much they could do without really thinking outside of the box. So that game there is isolated in its time period where it was a good game back then, but it's a struggle to play now for many modern gamers because it adds complexity where it doesn't need complexity. And the very new XCOM games that we got, not the third-person shooter, but the other ones
XCOM Enemy Unknown,
yes,
I believe.
Those
and the sequel.
And the sequel, good games with good fundamental basics that add they give you that same feel of XCOM, but make it a little bit more easier to play while having you focus on the strategy elements, the gameplay interaction. That's where you get problems.
Right.
And I feel with the original Red Alert and Command & Conquer, I do not believe there's anything there that's too egregious.
Yeah.
But I do believe that enough people are going to find tiny little things that they're not going to like.
You raise a good point, because when we play video games and we go through sequels and things, like, we experience the evolution. So we know where games started and stuff, but for someone who hasn't necessarily, especially RTS games, they're not as popular nowadays as they used to be, right?
Sure.
So yeah, someone that has never played an RTS game, has played other games like MOBAs, or maybe something like Civ, a game where you can kind of move units and build buildings and stuff, and they go back to Command and Conquer. There's a simplicity to it and a control scheme that it might feel a little bit archaic as well.
It's in all things. Look, if I were to take Super Mario Brothers from the NES and make it nowadays, and keep the 2D assets and everything, there are things that they did back then because of limitations that we don't do now. For instance, how do you run in Super Mario Brothers on the original NES?
You hold down is it the B button?
Yes. How do you do that on a modern game? You just push the joystick all the way. Sometimes the joystick itself gets pushed down. The actual degree of how much you push the joystick is how fast Mario will walk or run. He can even crawl. Like, there are little things that happen with the changes of game design because the controls have improved, the design of the things have improved. So it's the tiny things that are going to be in these games that even the game developers aren't thinking about, because it makes a lot of sense to them back then, but now it's a very different idea. Even just the organization of units. I know that at this point in time, we actually have RTS games that did away with the concept of clicking on a unit and seeing all their stats and everything to the side. It was just, you get like a little bar underneath them that tells you how much their health is and stuff, and you have a whole bunch of units and stuff like that. You could also set up waypoints, and there's a billion things that have happened with RTS games.
Yeah, you didn't have that in the original Command and Conquers, right?
So if they add those things in, that's neat, right? And I think they should do that, but at the same time, I want the option to go vanilla, old school, exactly like it was like.
Right.
And that goes with all of these games. The Warcraft 3 remake, I want that feature to be there that basically goes, okay, here's what it was like originally. With R-Type, we have just a button you can push, right? But at the same time, the improvements that go into these games need to be worth it. So for R-Type, it needs to look way prettier than it does. I don't think that it looks like a new game. It looks like something you would have seen on the GameCube or even a very late stage Nintendo 64
It looks
game.
like a bad PSP game to me.
The Warcraft 3 footage that we saw, I don't want to say it looks awful because I don't think it looks terrible, but it looks like bland. The ground textures lack depth and things that we have on modern games, so it almost feels like they didn't put as much time into it. And I really want to see because we haven't seen anything from Red Alert and Command & Conquer. I really want to make sure that if they're going to use a new 3D engine, where originally it was a 2D based engine, I want to make sure that what they're doing is replicating that same feel and idea. If you make a 3D engine for Red Alert, that means that, or Command & Conquer, even though Command & Conquer and Nintendo 64 actually had a 3D engine,
yes.
If you did that, that means you can move around the camera, right? On the original Red Alert, you didn't do that. No. So I want to know if they're going to be able to implement these things, and are they going to change the game so much that it's not fun?
Again, if many of these changes are placed into these games, they have to scrap the word remaster, right?
Yeah.
And these are specifically labeled remaster. So I don't know that they're going to be there. I would love them to be there, but it would be a remake. I don't know, maybe they're playing loose with the definition of the word as well. Some people use them interchangeably.
Yeah,
So we'll have to see there.
Look, folks, if you're interested in any of these remasters or future remasters in general, we want to hear from you. Let us know what you think about this.
I want to know what you guys want from a remaster. Like, can it go further than just being a visual upgrade and still be considered a remaster? What do you guys think?
Yeah, let us know what you think at Rerez TV on Twitter.